Hello, and welcome back to another video in EssayMaster's Law School Essay course. In this video, we're going to talk about the most important essay you'll be writing, your personal statement. So without further ado, let's get to it. So before we even discuss strategies or examples of personal statements, it's important to understand what exactly a personal statement is. Well, your personal statement is ultimately your chance to show the admissions committee who you are, your personal, professional, and academic journey, and why you're applying to law school. I like to say that if your resume answers who, what, where, when, your personal statement answers why, and to a lesser extent, how. As a quick reminder, though, read your school-specific prompt. Little nuances in wording can change what you address where. But how do you get started for something so open-ended? Well, the truth is, there are so many angles that it's impossible for us to tell you exactly which topic to pick. However, we can suggest one general tactic, and that is to ask the right questions, like, what made me want to become a lawyer? Why do I want to become a lawyer? What changes do I want to see as a lawyer? It's not that you have to answer all these questions, but these questions may lead you to an answer. For example, if you say, seeing my mother suffer from countless evictions in our youth due to arbitrary housing laws, as we once saw in one essay, maybe you can pick out something from that time to write about. With that said, we do have some general pointers as you work on this. First, do your due diligence. Don't just write about the first idea that comes to mind. It may very well work, but in our experience, the best drafts often wind up using a third or fourth idea. Second, be willing to be vulnerable. Dry, boring writing because you don't want to, quote, go into detail will make your statement boring. Now, of course, there is a fine line here. You don't have to share everything. But if you're having concerns about being too personal, well, remember, it's a personal statement. And finally, understand how it all connects. If you're going to talk in your application about growing up in rural Georgia, it may not make a lot of sense if the rest of your application talks about living in Atlanta. As for what not to do not write what you think admissions committees want. As discussed in our intro video, they want authenticity. And in that regard, writing what you think they want will make your essay the exact opposite, inauthentic and cliche. Don't literally say, I want to be a lawyer because of these reasons. That's telling, not showing, and it's just not good writing. And finally, don't write your resume in paragraph form. The personal statement is best written as a journey, not a recap of events. With all that in mind, let's look at some examples of what does and doesn't work. We'll start with how not to open your essay. Here, the student writes, quote, I want to attend Harvard Law School because I want to become an IP lawyer. Ever since I saw my father lose out on licensing fees because he did not patent his invention, I wanted to be on the side of justice. As a result, everything I have done in college has prepared me to become an IP lawyer to serve people like him. It should be pretty obvious why this doesn't work. For starters, there's no real fleshed out story, only a hint of one. For another, there's no detail here. What was his father's invention? What type of IP lawyer? Patent attorney, copyright, trademark? And finally, quote, everything I've done in college suggests this is about to be a resume recap, something we really want to avoid. On the other hand, here's an example of a great opener. It begins, quote, why shouldn't we print the names? I stared at the article I'd written, unable to answer my own question. At issue were the name of two students arrested for allegedly assaulting two police officers. I felt like an investigator, but I also felt uncertain. Now, this is really compelling. When we read this, we were immediately curious what the context was. In other words, we were hooked. Asking a question is a great way to involve the reader, as it almost encourages them to answer the question themselves. And we can be certain that this is setting up an interesting story, as we establish both an external conflict about printing the names and an internal conflict about feeling uncertain. So now let's examine a body paragraph from an essay that doesn't work. Here we say, quote, through a combination of film study and willpower, I led my team in conference and tackles. The most rewarding part of the season, though, was what I learned in the process. I developed self-awareness and confidence in the person I was. Now, aside from obvious proofreading issues, such as the fact that it says I led my team in conference, There's also the issue that while we at least have a sense of his journey and we do see how he's grown internally, it still feels very much like a list, almost like an emotional resume. We're not shown his journey through study and willpower, we're just told it happened. Also, self-awareness and confidence is vague and can apply to anyone's growth. Although it's kind of difficult to find words that are not cliche, you can eliminate this problem by showing a story. Sharing it with the reader will make them a lot more forgiving when you say, quote, you grew and developed self-awareness and confidence. On the other hand, here's a body paragraph that does work. It reads, quote, semesters later, I met one of those students. I had assumed he was guilty, but to find him innocent and a little abashed to meet me made my eyes stare at the floor. I wish I had had the chance to play a different role in those two students' lives, less focused on producing allegations and more focused on resolving them. So now this gets interesting. While this is just a sample of the larger personal statement, we get a sense of the climax of the story. And what could be higher stakes than meeting the person you condemned by printing their name? By getting the story right and establishing the journey, we're holding the reader's attentions, showing, not telling growth, and setting up why law school effectively. So now let's talk about wrapping up your essay. And here's an example of how not to do it. Here we have, quote, in conclusion, I would like to attend Harvard because it is the best school for my aspirations. I am excited at the prospect of attending, and I hope to achieve my dreams. Thank you for your consideration. Now understand, a closing paragraph can be a bit reflective and general. However, you don't want it to have it be so general that anyone could have written it. If I told you this paragraph was actually for a different essay, you really wouldn't know if it was true or not. Also, don't say something like, I am excited. Everyone is. Describe why you feel that way, not that you feel that way. And finally, you don't have to break the fourth wall, by saying something like, thank you for reading, or please let me know if you have questions. Let the essay stand on its own. Here, however, we close nicely with, quote, after spending a summer in the Department of Justice, I want to do more than repeat what others have said or testified. I want to help them with my experience and law degree. And when the time comes for me to pass judgment on a person whom I have never met, whose words pierce me through the telephone, I want more than just a police log to go on. Now, this close is so specific, you know whose essay it is, as it clearly circles back to the opening anecdote. We understand why this person wants to attend law school, and frankly, the writing's just really good. Now, you don't have to write like an English teacher would, but if you can use action verbs, descriptive adjectives, and emotionally compelling language, you'll have a really well-written essay. So that's all for this video, and in the next one, we'll tackle your second most common essay, the diversity statement.